Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Talk Openly. I'm Daniel. I'm here with my good friend Jac, and we have a very special evening planned for you all. We're here with our good Sangha friend, Matthew Kruse, and we're going to be talking all about intimacy. So we're going to pull up a chair. We're going to get nice and intimate.
Yeah, and Matthew, we're so excited to talk with you tonight. Daniel and I actually name drop you every once in a while in the show, so it's really nice to have you here. Just to introduce Matthew, well, he's been around Lion's Roar for longer than I have. So how many years now, Matthew?
I started coming around at the beginning of 2017.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, and then before that, I know you were also practicing with a Zen Sangha. Is that right?
Yeah, the Zen Sangha here in town, Valley Stream Zen Center.
Right.
Which is affiliated with the San Francisco Zen Center.
Got you. Yeah, so some real Dharma foundation. And then Matthew is also the founder of Noble Hearts Massage, which I know you are doing some outreach for first, or how would you say it? Kind of emergency providers.
Yeah, you're on it. First responders.
On it, right? First responders.
Yeah, so firefighters, paramedics, cops, anybody who shows up to traumatic situations to help our communities, and also veterans, because I'm a veteran. And so I'm always looking for clients in that classification to help out. And there's, it is sliding scale, but there's additional benefits for people in those classifications.
That's such important work. And just to be able to extend that, that literally real intimate hand to people who are dealing with such immense stress. And then the other, big project that you're involved with is Veterans Path. Could you tell us a little bit about Veterans Path and what they do?
Yeah, Veterans Path does mindfulness and meditation teaching to transitioning veterans. So they actually help veterans from quite a long time period if they've served since, I think, the first Gulf War. But like really honing in, the goal would be to serve veterans that are transitioning from the military to civilian life. And that transition has shown to be very poignant and difficult for people. And so helping set up veterans in a positive trajectory after so much loss of community and meaning in their lives can be very powerful.
Yeah. And
they do this both in they're teaching online courses now, and also during outdoor events. So like maybe rock climbing or kayaking is like examples of one-day events, and then there's multi-day events also, like whitewater rafting. There's even like a 4-month course.
That's so exciting. Yeah, and I mean, I work in mental health, and I just imagine that coming from, not just one traumatic event, but repeated over and over traumatic events, and then like you were saying, that kind of loss of community and that disconnection, that to have that is life-saving for a lot of people, I'm sure. Yeah,
it really is. I mean, the feedback I've gotten from so many people in Veterans Path is that it saved their life, and that it gave them a sense of camaraderie again, and a sense of belonging. And I mean, I think all of us can attest that these are the types of things that allow us to live honestly. I mean, it's just like I think baseline for being a human, that we need those things, and so joy, happiness, intimacy, these other things can't really come into being in a deep way without those foundations. And veterans, the numbers are dropping, but it's about 22 veterans a day commit suicide. So and the veteran population is actually really small in comparison with like the population of the United States. So, and of course, 22 seems like a really large number in and of itself, but we're really talking about a very selected population. So it's really important work, and it helped me immensely. I actually ended up going to Veterans Path because I was trying to get close to a Zen teacher that I had met, and I had been like reading and studying Zen on my own, like what Lama calls being a cowboy Dharma student. And so in these books I kept finding, it was like, you got to have a teacher. Like you can read and kind of absorb and like collect all this information, but until you're relating with another person, that information doesn't come alive. It's just collecting information. And so I was trying to get close to that teacher. Her name is Chris Fortin, and she's one of the founders of Veterans Path. And so as we got closer, she said, "Hey, you're a vet, you know, why don't you come check out Veterans Path?" And so I kind of went with this idea of like, I'm going to be a big helper. You know, I'm going to show up, and like, my life is like totally squared away, and I'm like meditating and studying Zen. And you know, luckily things aren't all this or all that, so I did get opportunities to help, but it ended up being just this amazing source of support and being able to discover my own aliveness and discover what was most meaningful to me in each moment, and just open me up in a way that I cannot begin to describe in words, but I can just say that it is like day and night. Like the transformation that group allowed me has made my life so much more rich and great, that I just owe them so much and can't speak highly enough about them.
Well, we are so blessed that Veterans Path exists, because, you know, I can't even imagine a Matthew without that kind of openness and just like kind of like where I feel this like almost gushing love, you know, that connects you with others. And so I am so grateful that Veterans Path exists to be able to open that up for you.
Thanks, Jac. And I know like it means a lot to me. Like that's one of the reasons, like I thought like you're one of the reasons, Daniel being the other one, that I thought of when y'all asked me to come on the show with you. And thank you so much. Really such a sweet offer. That, you know, we lived together for a year, and in doing that, I can honestly say, like, it just felt so easy to me at all times. You always seem so open and available and willing to be with me and to discuss things, and offered yourself to be part of my excitement and the things that fired me up. Like you were ready. And it was a wonderful experience, and I just continue to have those moments and that kind of a continued relationship with you.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I think that these are marks of intimacy.
Yes.
And so I thought, well, of course this is someone. And then Daniel, you're a big light. And definitely, I mean, talk about effusing love and like having energy and really being activated into action to help others. You know, I just have seen so much in the last couple of years of you not being in your own way and saying yes to help others. And so I was like, well, geez, like if there's two people I could talk to about intimacy and figure some stuff out, it would be these two.
Yeah, I gotta say, I feel kind of dumbstruck, like I'm sort of like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe I'm here with both of you. Like this is fantastic. It's like I have nothing but love for both of you. And I oftentimes view myself as coming up behind you guys, right? Because just at least chronologically, right? I'm like, whoa, it took me a little while to even, really start to embrace the path. Whereas you guys have been wholeheartedly chugging along for a while now, and I'm so inspired by you guys, and I feel like when I look back and I think to myself like, I oftentimes do this. Like I was just telling you the other day, Matthew, like I wanted to call you because I was just like I was sort of overwhelmed with gratitude. I was just sitting there doing the dishes, and I was just kind of like, wow, my life, like this transformation, this beautiful transformation that's going on. It's just amazing, right? And I'm so grateful. I'm so happy. And then I start to think, and I realize we're all interconnected. I get it, right? Like it's everybody. It takes the whole universe, right, to make it all happen. But when I look back on it, I think like, well, who are these like key individuals that along the way sort of like pushed me or nudged me in the right direction? You guys are both sitting right here, two of the main nudgers right here. Thanks for joining us, Matthew. It's so good to be with you.
Well, and that's a wonderful little segue, Daniel, into that conversation around intimacy, because what better way to describe intimacy, particularly within, Sangha or maybe Dharma friends, but that, sometimes there's a little bit of nudging, a little bit of pushing. And in my experience, it's not necessarily that it's direct, but there's this kind of like indirect quality of nudging within the Dharma friendship, where I get to see, like you were saying, each other's growth and see kind of what's happening and be really inspired. And so maybe we could just start off talking about, Matthew, what do we mean? What do you mean when we talk about intimacy within the Dharma?
I guess my first thought is that I don't believe that there's any delineation or difference between Dharma intimacy and any other type of intimacy that I can think of. And what I'm curious about is how, like, what are the marks of intimacy? How do we go about being intimate? And what is necessary to maintain intimacy? And I should say too, I don't think this is talked about a lot. Like I haven't heard this a lot, but most really actualized teachers that I've heard speak about intimacy will say like intimacy is the whole of the path. Mm. It's actually what we're doing. But to say what that is for me, I don't think I could. And that actually, if it's okay, I brought two stories. So I brought a Zen story and I brought a Tibetan story from our own tradition. But the Zen story is it's a koan. So I always like those because they're like, I love how they're kind of like riddles.
Yeah.
It feels like a riddle and it seems so much more profound than like sometimes when it's just like said directly. So is it okay if I?
Please do. Yeah.
So this is a story from the book of Equanimity, case 20. It's called the Rinzai, the different koans. There's often there's case studies, so they'll be numbered. And so kind of some background. The person Hogan, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's a Chinese name. I believe he's supposed to be a person that actually existed. And so interestingly, a lot of these koans are two monks that actually existed having just interaction. And they become teaching stories. And, you know, whether or not those interactions actually happened or if they like maybe made it up to, I don't know. This one's kind of interesting though, because it has, instead of another human being, it has this person, Jitso. And Jitso is like a deity person in the Zen tradition, and he is the protector of animals and children, particularly, but then protects everyone through transition. And so it's kind of cool that they put him in this story. So Hogan is like a senior student, or maybe even a teacher at that point. Like he's probably teaching the Dharma, but not totally realized he's not a master. And he's during the summer months, they would travel around. Japan was too hot to sit in the zendo. So they would go on pilgrimage and like travel around to different temples, meet other monks, have conversations, listen to other teachers, see if they had a more intimate connection with a different teacher, you know. So Hogan is walking to a temple, and it's Master Jitso's temple, and he says, I'm going to read it because I really like this version. So Jitso asked Hogan, "Where are you going, monk?" And Hogan said, "I am on pilgrimage, following the wind." Jitso said, "What are you on pilgrimage for?" Hogan thought and said, "I don't know." And Jitso said, "Not knowing is most intimate." And Hogan suddenly attained great enlightenment.
What do you make of that?
I think like my initial reaction is that I have to be open and willing to be surprised for intimacy to exist. Because my experience is that like so much of my life and my day and my interactions with others and with things and with my own thoughts and my own states of being, my own emotions are just kind of like, oh, well, that's this. And I treat it accordingly and move on. But when I'm doing that, I'm very much just in my own world. And so if I bring that, like, I don't know what this is. I don't actually know what this is. Like I'm running around thinking I know, but it gives me a little bit of pause and space to be curious about that and see what comes up.
Well, it sounds like that, you know, being willing to say, I don't know, you know, you have to be vulnerable to say that. And, you know, saying I don't know to someone is hard for me, actually. I have a lot of pride in that, and something that I'm working on is not feeling like I have to be an expert at everything, which actually really shuts down curiosity and that intimacy of connecting with someone so that I can be taught. And so I really appreciate that sentiment that, you know, well, I don't know, opens up a space to be vulnerable, to be open, and to receive, which is really beautiful.
It is. And when you say receive, can you talk about that more?
Yeah, well, I'm thinking about I mean, my relationship with my teacher, right? With Lama Jempa, but also fellow students. I'm receiving teaching all the time. And not just through words, but through behavior. And there's this quality that has deepened over time, my ability to be open to that, rather than, kind of what you were saying about just being in my little unit here and not, not allowing myself or feeling like I can have a boundary and not let others kind of energy or teaching or, their is it adhishtanta? Is that kind of like the energy of the guru that, just being around someone with that kind of faith can permeate us. And so there's, I think, a deepening over time that can happen when we're in relationship with a teacher and, Sangha friends, that we can, it's the breaking down of that self-centered unit.
Yeah, it seems to me that the knowingness is sort of like a hallmark of the sort of misperceived self, and that it creates a barrier to receiving or to presence. To me, intimacy and presence are sort of correlated, quite intimately. And I in my own story, I feel like with regard to both Lama Jimpa and to the Sangha at large, it was my knowingness actually that kind of got in the way, right? Like I knew it was a cult. I knew it was all kinds of like, whatever I thought organized religion was, and this sort of top-down hierarchy and power dynamics and whatever. I just knew, and I knew it was crazy stuff with all these images. I wouldn't even go into the temple because I just knew, right? And that it's nothing like that, right? It was only the wearing away over a long period of time of the sort of what I knew, and sort of allowing, it was actually the Sangha members themselves who sort of wore it away, because, that was the thing, is I actually also knew all these people, like I didn't, but I thought I did, right? I would be like, oh, there's that guy, and he thinks, look, there's Matthew, he thinks he's the whatever, blah, 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 spiritual guru, hippie, something, or whatever. I had strong feelings. I knew Jac right when Jac walked in. I've talked to you about this. I knew exactly who Jac was when they walked into the meditation, Wednesday night meditation. I just knew it, right? And every single time as I got to know the Sangha members, I was surprised to learn that everything that I knew, literally everything that I knew, was just wrong. It wasn't true. And so, it was only that wearing down gradually over time that I was like, wow, none of the things that I know appear to be true. And I got to open up to something closer to the truth of what the people are, who the teacher is, and what Buddhism as a whole, what the teachings themselves, what the Dharma is, I had no idea. I still have very little idea, but I feel much more comfortable now saying that I don't know, and opening up and being like, sort of receiving, as Jac is saying, what's there. It's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think I'm really struck by what you both said. Like two main points. First, Jac mentioned vulnerability. And so it can be hard for me to just be open, right? Like I like doing stuff. I'm highly energetic, right? Like I will always have, I think it maybe is going to be a life, one of my teachers totally from Veterans Path, I was like, well, I'm slowing down a little bit, but I still go pretty fast. And she just kind of looked at me and said, well, some things are lifelong challenges. And, so like, that's always a big thing for me. So I always know like shamatha, right? Like I have to slow down. I have to keep my brakes on and really be focusing on like, how do I stop my own push to move forward, so that I can even be open to what's happening and what people are, much less vulnerable, right? Because I think vulnerable is just like openness with the possibility of a threat, or with a threat, right? So there's a possibility I'm gonna be hurt. And like, Daniel brought it, like there is real concern, I think, when getting into any organization. Well, what is this organization about? How am I going to be treated? Are they acting ethically behind closed doors? Like, these are things that need actually to be inspected. I don't want to be naive, right? Like, I also don't want to be paranoid, but like, so that's a balance that I have to strike. And that vulnerability, getting close to that, and even like understanding when I'm vulnerable. Like Jac, you mentioned, this is the second thing, like you mentioned, having a moment, not like feeling like not having a hard time saying you don't know.
Yeah.
Like I can do that really well with facts. But if I'm in a state of confusion, and that is generally caused by vulnerability for me, right? Like, I think a lot because of my status and the things I've been through, that like I just had to shut vulnerability down. Like, I wasn't going to be that, and I can't be that because of my identity. So when I'm in that place of feeling vulnerable, I'll just get very confused because it's so hard for me to just come into contact with the fact that I feel vulnerable.
Right.
So I do think that like that the points you two are bringing up about vulnerability, that's a huge part of how do I live intimately.
Yeah, and I want to ask you too, you said that there's this confusion that comes up, or maybe like these parts of your identity or history that kind of shut you off to that. And I'm wondering, what has it taken for you to be able to be vulnerable, maybe even within that confusion? Where did that come from?
That's a great question. I think, honestly, that's a lot of what led me to Dharma, is finding that didn't work, and realizing, I think to some extent, like that I was building a castle of loneliness, right? And I think that anytime we try to be impenetrable, right, that intimacy is lost, right? We have to be affected. And so I had to go through situations that, despite my very profound abilities at protecting my inner world from the outside world, that's what I thought I was doing. It didn't work. And I had to eventually say, I am affected. This is here, and I don't want to be alone. I want to be with others, and I want to be connected, and I want to know what is most meaningful in each moment and try to connect with that.
So something in you was calling out. I can't be like this anymore.
Yeah, and I think it's like it's childlike innocence. Like, there was an innocence that was there that was like, I can no longer deny this thing in me that is clearly good, and I'm trying to disconnect it from everything because it's sensitive, because it gets affected.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. Well, it sounds like you've had to develop a lot of intimacy with yourself
We
be able
do.
to get where you are. Yeah. Yeah.
That's really the starting point, isn't it? Right? To calm things down a little bit and to see yourself honestly and touch that soft, gentle part. You know, you talked about the castle of loneliness that you were building. And I'm curious, what would you call the antithesis of that? Like, what would you say is the, like, if the castle of loneliness is sort of this disconnected, protected thing, how would you refer to the opposite of that? What were you aiming for?
Just like that, you know.
Mm.
I don't know what that is.
It's like there's a real being out there in a way with each other. Something that Lama brings up every once in a while is how in our tradition, you know, the figures are kind of like out and open, you know, eyes like wide and like posture like open, and I think there's something there with you know, that we're just here with each other, and if we could tap into that by going in and sensing ourselves and each other, there's this real alive quality, and it can be really energizing too. So I think, you know, something that I love about our tradition is that we're finding calm and stability, yet there's also this like radiant, like kind of just energetic reaching out to each other, that I think is just so cool.
Right, it is. And so, you know, I find myself in practice, like there's always these periods of like emulation, right, where it's a little bit like fake it till I make it, right? Like, well, I'm gonna try to be this, you know, but at the end of the day, it's that, you know, and eventually I'll learn my lessons through that, you know, especially in dealing one-on-one with Lama, and not only one-on-one, just in situations with him, because it'll get pointed out how I'm not completely here. And also, what I find it really interesting is that even though I'm having these times where I'm like emulating, eventually I'll relax. And then it'll be pointed out like, you're here, I'm here.
Huh.
It's here. Right? And it's not what I expect, right? But I think there's something going on where for me to mature, I have to both be like putting in effort and then like losing that effort and just being it. And the relationship with the Lama is I think incredibly fast because of the direct pointing out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Could you tell us a little bit more about, you know, how you came to be in relationship with Lama as your teacher, as your guru?
seems so much like it's just continuous. Very like conventional side, like I was like living down the street and there was a child care program and I have a daughter. And so like, I thought like, okay, she can have like some other kid fun and I can like listen to some Dharma. And I'd had a friend for like a decade that was at Lion's Roar and would always encourage me, like, you should come meet my teacher. You should come meet my teacher. And I was very like stubborn. I had my castle, my Zen castle, I was like, I'm Zen, I'm not gonna come there. And so I just started listening. And what I heard was very profound. I'm glad that I had collected a bunch of knowledge at that point because I was able to hear Lama talking about pretty complex Buddhist thought in a very normal way, in a very plain, personable way. And that really blew me away. And so I started trying to be around him. And that took time. I am like an independent person, and I had some similar concerns that Daniel mentioned earlier. And so that relationship developed. I think I had to take time in trying to interact to figure out that this person was not going to try to use me or manipulate me. And also that I couldn't get what I wanted out of him necessarily. What I was, my own little game that I couldn't get it, that he read that and that he was willing to be very, very sane with me and extremely understanding of my own head trip. And like, it's never been used against me. I've never felt criticized. But in relating with sanity, it has become very clear to me, Well, yeah. maybe that's an overstep. It's becoming more and more clear to
me. Daniel, you reacted pretty strongly.
Oh my God.
I want to hear.
Yeah, man. I everything that you just said, that's exactly my experience. That feeling of like, I had built up this whole, like I said, this whole notion of who he was and what I could expect and what this was all about. And I remember the first time that I went and met with him, I had no idea that, that there might be a time limit or anything, but I had multiple pages of all these things, these experiences that I had that I thought were so special to me, my spiritual trip, and I just knew there was some magic going on and some kind of like woo, all kinds of stuff, right? And he was so kind. I can't believe he just listened to me. He didn't say much, right? He just listened. And then the utter sanity that you just mentioned was, it made me really mad, actually, that first time that I met with him. I left really disappointed. I did. I went in, I was like, okay, after all this, I'm going to get some real good stuff out of this guy, And what I remember, like I came back and my oldest daughter, she was like, okay, hey, you met with the Lama. How was it? And I was like, it was like this. He, basically he just said this. And she was like, well, yeah, of course, that's how it is, right? Like, yeah, like, of course, Dad, like, that's just duh, right? And it was that kind of utter sort of simplicity, and it was profound, right? Like, I actually, I have this journal that I was keeping track of, and there was this, it was a turning point for me. where on subsequent visits, there was sort of more and more experiences of that. And, I get the sense that, within any type of intimacy, these qualities that we sometimes talk about, these Brahma Viharas, right? Loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. He really embodied that, and he was willing to extend, even though I had this sort of solid like knowingness of who he was, and there was all kinds of resistance and stuff. None of that, I didn't meet any of that in him, right? And there was nothing but just love and deep compassion for my crazy state, my delusions, right? And just sort of like, okay, like let it be, let it settle a bit. And then it was always really just solid advice, right? And whenever I took the advice, it led to pretty rapid results, right? Like I could see what was happening as soon as I did what he suggested. And there was never one of the things that I had sort of feared all along was this like strong, powerful, like I'd heard these stories of, gurus and lamas who were really like telling you how it is and telling you what to do and stuff like that. And that was never my experience. It was very gentle, just sort of like, okay, yeah, I see where you're at. How about this, And then I would just go and do whatever it was that he said, and there would be some kind of results. Amazing.
Yeah, I don't know how I picked this up from what you were talking about, but like in whatever I've brought, and probably more amazing is what I've seen in him interacting. And this to me is like real intimacy, is this being willing to be with whatever feeling, thought process, or event is happening in that moment. And being there with it and not trying to control it, not trying to shut it down. And at first, I didn't realize how compassionate that was. I was like, why are you letting that person act like that? Why don't you tell them, that's not what a good Buddhist does. Like, tell them not to do that. Why don't you do it this way? Like, right? Like, I didn't see how compassionate that was, not to have ownership over the situation and not to control other people. The deep compassion and love in that, and being comfortable with that full array of experience, and that to me is like the most high,
Yeah, I feel like just that experience of truly radical acceptance of another person. I mean, there's been so many times where I've entered darshan and kind of like, what Daniel's saying, have these wild ideas or have really wild emotions and be kind of like, I just need to start from the beginning, Mama. I need something simpler. I need, like, I can't do this, basically. And for him to accept that is what I was going through, while also holding me up to reflect, actually, this is what you can do. you can do this. And here I'm gonna like we're gonna laugh a little bit, we're gonna talk, and it's amazing how much my relationship to myself can shift, even in just like a 30-minute conversation, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that is that true vulnerability of deep relationship, where, like you were saying, Matthew, this willingness to see where someone's at, just to be there and to be present. And I think, also bringing in a little bit of guru magic, there's some guru magic there, that I think, is simply deep compassion, that we can feel on so many levels. So yeah, I echo all of the things.
And one thing that's encouraging for me too is that it kind of goes both ways. Like, I feel like I'm like, like there's this kind of like bearing of my soul or whatever, right? Like this kind of like, here I am, here's me, help me, right? There's this sort of like me, right? And I along the way, I get these glimpses of the person, the human being, right? That who Lama is and like what he's gone through in his own life, because so much of intimacy has to do with, with understanding, right? And he has this incredible understanding based upon rich personal experience, right, of the human condition, the wide range of it, right? It's and his willingness to share that and be like, yeah, hey, look, here's some of what, here's some of me. So we get to see, like there's a sort of a glimpse of like the formation, like how he arrived at where he is now, and also we get to see how he continues to interact not just with us but with other people in the Sangha, as you said, Matthew. There are these times in my mind that I like just stick out. They like glaring examples where I just remember like this, like, whoa, there he is, like, because he definitely can point to where I am, but there's these times where I'm like, whoa, there's Lama in action, right? And it really, like, then I'm not joking, like they just like, they stand out as these incredible, vivid memories, right? Of like particular examples of like deep compassion, and even of like strong, I don't know if they're strong feelings. I like what appeared to be like something akin to anger. It wasn't anger, but something like that, right? Like a fierceness. Like seeing that range is it's quite remarkable. So there's that aspect of like allowing us to see some of him too, that I feel really helps. It doesn't just help me to know that he understands like my condition or what we're going through, but it develops a lot of trust. And I think trust is such an important part of intimacy, and knowing that he's not coming, basically, like, he's not coming from this top-down position. He's coming from a position of like deep knowing, right? And that so much of his experiences, come from his work at actually, being a compassionate person towards other beings, right? So the range of people that he's had to comfort and to help and to, help heal themselves has been so vast. So like, when I stop to think about it, I'm like, man, I don't know anything. I can't even scratch the surface of what he knows about the human condition.
Yeah. And from like, when I think about that vast array, being comfortable and open and willing to interact with that vast array, and I think about my own experience, like what I know is I can't be comfortable with someone else if their discomfort is something I have not found in myself and made peace with and figured out how to be compassionate with myself, right? So it is, whenever I see my own aversion or grasping, and what's really hard, the things I just don't pay attention to, right? That's really hard to notice when something's just not important to me. It doesn't fit into my narrative. It's not really something I'm pushing away. It's not really something I'm grasping. To somebody else, it might be something very important, and I'll just let it drop. But seeing those things and then becoming open and comfortable to them, and that's actually happening in me, right? They're bringing up something that I don't want to deal with, right? Or that I don't think is important, or that really grinds my gears, or I find just really boring, like I have to listen to this story again, right? So how do I become comfortable in myself with all these states of being? Like, what are they? And how do I come to peace with them? And that's the only way I can fathom that I'll ever be able to sit across from someone and be that for them.
How
And
are you developing that intimacy with yourself?
shamatha. Shamatha.
The long, arduous road of shamatha.
Yeah. And I mean, I do find more and more deity yoga is very helpful for specific states. Like, that's more where I'm at right now anyway, is that the tantras give me an opportunity to create the experience of certain energies and states of being. And so by doing them, I both know where that is and how to create it and become comfortable in those energies. And it's also giving me an idea of like how far away from them I am, right? So I know where these different home bases are, and when I'm in the forest. If we have time, I should maybe read one from our tradition.
Yeah.
So this is, I feel like it's so much more direct, which I really appreciate. So this was Tilopa said this to Naropa. And then if you know, Naropa was Marpa's teacher, Marpa was Milarepa's teacher. And so Tilopa's Indian, Marpa was Tibetan, so you kind of see, and then Milarepa is like considered the I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but the first like fully realized Tibetan person. So just also to kind of put, I think that's neat, because it's like putting this time scale of like how Dharma moves into a country and how long it takes for like enlightened beings to start popping up. And like, we're so lucky to be in a place like, I think there's, quite a few in California actually. But anyway, so Tilopa said to his disciple Naropa, "The mind is not bound by appearances. The mind is bound by grasping. O Naropa, cut through grasping." And there is a note that in translation, appearance we would also call like phenomenology, all phenomenon, internal, external.
And I love that. That's just, and I think, are you reading from Ganges Mahamudra, or?
I wasn't actually. That
okay, yeah.
It's from a tricycle article, but I wouldn't doubt if that is in Ganges.
Well, I love those.
It just says there's a well-known pith instruction.
Yeah. Those verses really do just kind of, cut to the point. And I know Tilopa and Naropa had a very intimate and kind of wild relationship, and so they, must have known each other's minds so well to be able to just kind of place those teachings at the right moment to kind of just, cut through ignorance.
I'm so glad you brought that particular quote up, Matthew, because I actually had an experience very recently that was similar to this. Something had come up on Sunday related to rebirth and reincarnation. I happened to ask Matthew a question about it, and Matthew took his sweet time and replied via text message with one little statement. Just one sentence. And this morning I went to go meditate, and I had no idea. I was just going to do shamatha, right? Like I wasn't up to anything. And I sat down to meditate, and what happened was all of a sudden the whole spectrum of like I realized that there was this grasping at these appearances, that's what was happening. There was this incredible tightness around, like, about this grasping nature. And something about that one comment by Matthew was like a cutting sword, right? And I watched, it was the most beautiful thing as that got released. It was gorgeous. I sent you a message about it right afterward, Matthew. I was just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. This was really, what a fantastic experience, right? That exactly that was going on. I got to see it where I was like, there was this tightness, there was this wanting to know, there was this kind of bound up energy, and then the release of that energy, right? It was an incredibly dynamic and moving experience. Thanks to you, bro. Thank you.
Appreciate that. But the things like that, like, I have to always, it's not like it was me. I can't say that anymore. Like, with my relationship with teachers and with the Dharma, I know for a fact it's not a me.
Yeah. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's just this really amazing thing that's going on between us when we start practicing, that we can, like, be friends like this with each other. And it actually, so what you just brought up too is like this really main point of the couple articles I was like, reading about intimacy, and the kind of the highest point that they all made or got to was that the intimacy we're talking about in Buddhism, which again, I don't think can be delineated from any type of intimacy, is beyond all thought or words. It is the experience.
Well, and that we can offer experience to each other is just so fantastic and beautiful and kind of wild and unruly sometimes, and that's it, it's everything. And what's the story of it's Ananda, asks the Buddha, he says, good friends are half the path. And the Buddha told him, don't say that, Ananda. Having good Dharma friends isn't half of the path. It is the path. And so I just feel so grateful to have both of you as such good Dharma friends. I am truly, truly, deeply grateful. Thank you, Matthew, so much for joining us. It's been a joy.
Thanks for inviting me. It's been so sweet talking to you both. I love you dearly.
I love you too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, all right, everybody. Thanks for joining. We'll be back next Tuesday, and take care of yourselves.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.